My genius son learned calculus at the age of 7. My wife said I was damn lucky to marry her. If you had married any other woman, you wouldn't have had such a smart kid. She was explicitly and implicitly showing off her superior genes to me. Later, during an interview, my son also thanked her first. But when the reporter mentioned me, his face turned cold. If his genes hadn't lowered my IQ, I would have graduated from college by now. Mom, let's not invite Dad next time we eat fried chicken, okay? He's just a clueless idiot. You're right, he really is quite stupid. The mother and son were happily making fun of me in the bathroom. It was just like how they mocked me in front of all the reporters this morning. If his genes hadn't lowered my IQ, I would have graduated from college by now. My son Silas had a face full of disgust toward me. Valerie was also secretly and openly putting me down. At that moment, I suddenly felt like a complete fool. My self-righteous sacrifices had only moved myself. Elias, remember to wash my and Silas's dirty clothes. She was wearing a face mask like a proud peacock, giving me the side eye the whole time. Oh right, that top of mine needs to be hand-washed. On the other side, Silas, who was playing on his phone in his room, told me to blow-dry his hair. Why aren't you over here yet? Are you only going to be happy when I catch a cold? Valerie, curled up on the sofa, was engrossed in her phone. It seemed they took everything I did for granted. The house I had just cleaned this morning was a mess again. My body and mind had never been so exhausted. I went back to the bedroom, took my important documents, and walked out the door. It wasn't until the next morning that Valerie realized I wasn't home. She called me in a huff. Where did you go? Don't you know Silas needs to get up early for breakfast and school? I rubbed my sleepy eyes and spoke hoarsely. I'm not home, so you can cook for him. Valerie got even angrier. Elias, do you think everyone is as free as you? I have my own job. My son also chimed in on the other end of the line. Yeah, if mom didn't work, who would support you? After we got married, Valerie made me quit my job. She said she was in poor health and wanted me to stay home and take good care of her for a while. Later, we had a child. I had even less time to find a job. Every day I opened my eyes, I had to coax and feed the baby. If he cried, fussed, or got hungry in the middle of the night, it was all on me. He wasn't easy to handle as he got older either. Future planning, study goals, and health nutrition all had to be kept up with. But Valerie never thought about any of this. Now that Silas had achieved a little success, she started to get smug. She told everyone that I was incredibly lucky to marry her. If you had married any other woman, you wouldn't have had such a smart kid. Her few words completely denied my efforts. The child I raised from a young age didn't know how to respect me either. A mocking smile tugged at the corners of my lips. What exactly had I been holding on to all these years? Elias, hurry up and come back to take Silas to school. I still have to go to work. Valerie, you should quit your job. Valerie was in disbelief. What nonsense are you talking about? You want me, a manager, to quit? Are you out of your mind? I laughed. Didn't you make me a vice president, quit back then too? I was originally going to be transferred to the North American division as the regional CEO. But Valerie begged me to stay with her in tears. That's when I gave up my career. Valerie was silent for a long while before speaking. Elias, what kind of tantrum are you throwing? In her eyes, anything that went against her wishes was just me making a scene. Forget it, let her think what she wants. Over the phone, I called her name. Let's get a divorce. Elias, you are really crazy. She hung up the phone with a loud smack. I didn't go home to pack my things. I bought a plane ticket for the afternoon and went straight back to my hometown. Before the plane took off, Valerie called me again. You've been throwing a fit all morning. It's time to come home and cook. I didn't even yell at you for not blow-drying Silas's hair last night, which made him catch a cold. Come to think of it, Silas is already 7 years old this year. I still have to stay with him when he blows his hair and takes a shower. Usually, I even have to feed him personally when he eats. If I let him do it himself, Valerie and her whole family would come and accuse me. He only needs to be responsible for studying, and you as a father should do these things for the child. I don't owe him anything. Remember to take him to see his chess teacher, Mr. Davies, this weekend. I took the initiative to hang up the phone and turned on airplane mode. I didn't tell my parents I was coming home this time. When I got home, they were just stunned for a moment. Then they started bustling around me again. Are you unhappy in New York? You look like you've lost weight. My mom talked to me while kneading dough. My dad was mixing the dumpling filling on the side. If you're unhappy, just come home and visit. Your mom and dad are here waiting for you. My nose suddenly stung, and I turned around to rub my reddening eyes. I'm not going back to New York. After 2 seconds of silence, my mom patted my shoulder. It's good that you're not going back. You can stay home and help your dad tinker with the garden. My dad laughed. And you can take over the chores for me, by the way. My mom glared at him. Step aside. I burst out laughing. It's still the most comfortable staying in my own home. After dinner, I went shopping with my parents. Coincidentally, I bumped into my former boss, Harrison Reed. He rushed over enthusiastically to greet me and chat. He asked all sorts of questions just to know if I had a job. Actually, he had always wanted me to go back to work all these years. In the past, I politely declined a few times due to family reasons. But this time, I should learn to think for myself. If you want to stay in Chicago, I'll arrange a position for you here. We can discuss the details later. Since Mr. Reed has put it this way, it would be rude for me to refuse again. Ha ha ha, then we'll talk about work tonight. I won't disturb you from spending time with your parents now. After saying goodbye to him, I realized my airplane mode wasn't turned off. To avoid missing any important messages, I quickly turned it off. Then ping ping ping, it was all messages from Valerie. In short, she was scolding me for being irresponsible. Why are you giving me attitude for no reason? She also sent me a video of her taking our son to eat fast food. In the video, Silas's face was covered in grease, his mouth stuffed full, mumbling about how great his mom was. Elias, if you keep making a scene, there won't be a place for you in this house anymore. Usually, I don't let Silas eat these fried things indiscriminately. If he eats too much, he'll get a stomachache and get sick. But he never learns, and he always complains that I control him too much because of this. I deleted the words I had originally typed expressing concern for the child, and instead sent a short message. I don't care anymore. Harrison Reed has had some things going on recently, so he told me that work would have to wait for a month. I just took this time to sort out my own affairs. It had been 2 days since I last chatted with Valerie. I originally planned to mail the divorce agreement over. On second thought, it would be better to make this clear in person. As soon as I opened the door to the house, a stench choked me so much that I backed out again. It just so happened that Valerie and the others had just returned. She looked me up and down. Has the sun risen from the west? You fooled around outside for 2 days and finally know how to come back. There was a man standing next to them. Silas seemed to like him very much, holding tightly to his chest the whole time. Valerie ignored me and opened the door to let that man go in and pack up. She casually tossed her bag onto the sofa. Elias, this family won't stop spinning just because you're not here. Silas grabbed a can of ice-cold cola and chimed in. That's right, Dad is not only stupid, but also self-righteous. I glanced coldly at the man who was trying to curry favor with the mother and son, and laughed out loud. Yes, I'm clumsy and stupid, and I affected your chances of getting into college. Silas couldn't hear the hidden meaning in my words. But Valerie heard it. So you've been throwing a tantrum with me these days, because we told the reporters the truth. The truth? Heh, this was indeed the truth in her heart. We had been together for 8 years. Every day she would pick on me for various things. I knew nobody was perfect, so I endured it. But ever since Silas was born, she intensified her efforts to find spiritual comfort by putting me down. I admit that Silas is a bit smarter than others. He is naturally sensitive to numbers. When other kids were still babbling and learning to speak, he could already solve elementary school math problems. He learned calculus at the age of 7. He was hailed as a child prodigy. However, jade cannot be made into anything without being carved. If it weren't for my cultivation, would he have achieved what he has today? Besides, I don't think my Harvard degree is that bad. On the contrary, it's Valerie. She's just a master's graduate from an ordinary college. Back then, I went to the company where she was interning to discuss business, and someone drugged my drink when I wasn't paying attention. Then I had a physical relationship with her. My morals didn't allow me to be irresponsible. So we got married. We had a child soon after getting married. I originally wanted to wait until her career was stable before having a child. But she was in a hurry. She said she wanted to give me a child first. But after the baby was born, I heard her mother say to her, "Now you can rest assured. Even if he finds out that you were the one who drugged him back then, for the sake of the child, he won't pursue it. Even if he wants a divorce, he has to give you half of his assets." I was really uncomfortable when I heard that at the time. But my attention was quickly drawn to the baby. I thought, let the past be the past. As long as we can live well in the future, it's fine. But facts proved that I thought too much. Alright, even if Silas and I said the wrong thing before, I'm apologizing to you now, okay? You're making such a big fuss over such a trivial matter. So petty. The man cleaning up on the side also laughed and made sarcastic remarks at me. Silas's dad, you should be content. If I had such a genius son, even if he called me a piece of shit, I would gladly accept it. The child, who had been staring at his phone, looked up and said, "He can't even compare to Uncle Tristan." I pursed my lips, took out the divorce agreement, and placed it on the table. Sign it. You get the child, and we split the property in half. Valerie stared at the agreement and laughed in anger. Elias, do you have to make things so ugly? You want a divorce, right? Sure. We'll get a divorce if you leave with nothing. The divorce wasn't settled. I still had to prepare for work, so I went back to Chicago first. The next time I saw Valerie, she was swaggering into Chicago with our son to participate in a calculus competition. And I happened to be here to meet a friend. Valerie tilted her chin and showed off to me that our son got first place in the competition. I watched the whole competition too. Although Silas won, his strength had dropped a lot compared to before. And he had gotten fat. During the time I was away, he had obviously eaten a lot of junk food. He also had blisters from eating too much junk food at the corner of his mouth that hadn't gone away. I won't say anymore. We have to go meet fans and shoot a commercial later. Our Silas is a man with a career now. Before they left, that man came looking for them again. Valerie's relationship with him was very ambiguous. Silas was also calling him Uncle Tristan, ignoring me the whole time. Hey Elias. Sorry, I just finished up. My friend rushed over and apologized to me. The restaurant is already booked, let's go in my car. As we walked past Valerie, they were surrounded by a group of moms. Those people were all asking her for advice on how to raise a child prodigy. Actually, there's no special method. The main thing is to urge the child to study on his own. Oh, don't be modest. I heard you yourself have a master's degree. Valerie smiled and said she wasn't being modest, but the joy and smugness in her eyes were about to overflow. By the way, is this the child's father? The father and son look quite alike. Valerie was stunned for a moment and wanted to deny it. But when she made eye contact with me, she grabbed the man's arm and tacitly agreed. My friend asked me if I knew Valerie. She's incredible, giving birth to such a great son. Learned calculus at the age of 7. You tell me, we're all human. How did their brains grow to be so smart? Elias, you should hurry up and have a kid too. Your high IQ needs to be passed down to contribute to society. My friends around me only knew that I was married. I had never taken the initiative to mention my marriage partner or child, so it was normal that they didn't know. I have a child. He slammed on the brakes and looked at me in surprise. Fortunately, there weren't many cars on the road. I pursed my lips and told him to pay attention to safety. He smiled awkwardly. Sorry, got a little emotional. How old is the kid now? Going to school in New York? How are his grades? I haven't been keeping track lately. His mom and I are getting a divorce. Who gets the kid? With a ding, a ringtone interrupted what I wanted to say. Elias, you want to divorce my daughter? Mrs. Croft shrieked, saying her daughter almost lost half her life giving birth to my child. And now I was ignoring the child and trying to split her daughter's assets. You're more shameless than a rat. My friend spoke up for me over the phone out of a sense of justice. Mrs. Croft directly cursed my friend along with me. Enough, I lowered my voice. You know very well who owns the higher share of our joint marital property. I previously had millions in savings, and although I hadn't worked much later, there were still daily expenses. Silas always called me useless because Valerie was always putting me down in front of him, making me out to be good for nothing. After hanging up the phone, Valerie sent me a video. In the video, Silas was clinging tightly to that man. Uncle Tristan, I really want you to be my dad. Valerie sent a voice message. Elias, there are plenty of people lining up to be my son's father. Don't be ungrateful. Damn. Your wife is this aggressive. My friend swallowed hard, then supported my divorce. But, you don't want the kid either? Thinking of the scene just now, I looked out the window and replied absent-mindedly. I don't want him anymore. The legal paperwork hit Valerie's desk on a rainy Tuesday morning. I didn't hire a local family court mediator. Through Harrison Reed's network, I retained Marcus Vance, a senior partner at one of the country's most ruthless asset protection and matrimonial litigation firms. When Marcus looked over my financial history, he let out a low whistle. Mr. Sterling, you've been running this household like a philanthropic charity. For a woman who was actively siphoning your premarital capital, Marcus said, tapping a red pen against a thick stack of bank ledgers. Did you know that out of the joint account you funded with your consulting royalties, over $300,000 was transferred to an LLC registered under her mother's maiden name? I didn't monitor it, I admitted, looking out the floor-to-ceiling window of Marcus's Manhattan satellite office. When I gave up my position to stay home, I set up automatic disbursements from my private trust to cover all household expenses, Silas's tutoring, and Valerie's discretionary spending. I assumed she was managing our savings responsibly. She wasn't, Marcus replied bluntly. She was funding her brother's failed restaurant, paying her mother's mortgage, and over the last 6 months cutting checks to a talent management entity called Tristan Gray Media. I closed my eyes. The pieces fit together with sickening clarity. Tristan wasn't just a random man Valerie had met at a math competition. He was a third-rate social media manager, a parasite who specialized in exploiting viral child prodigies for corporate brand deals. Valerie had met him, fallen for his slick flattery, and used my money to finance his company so he could turn Silas into a commercial cash cow. What about custody? Marcus asked, watching my face carefully. Sole physical and legal custody to Valerie, I said. My voice was completely steady. I won't contest it. Marcus raised an eyebrow. You realize Silas is legally your child. even if his public remarks were deeply disrespectful. You have the right to petition for joint custody, especially given your educational background. No, I replied, the word cold and absolute in the quiet room. Silas has made his choice. For 7 years, I poured every ounce of my energy, intellect, and patience into that boy. I woke up at 5 in the morning to prepare nutrient-dense meals tailored to his brain development. I designed customized spatial and logic curricula that disguised advanced mathematical concepts as interactive games. I monitored his sleep cycles, his emotional regulation, and his cognitive fatigue. I looked down at my hands, the hands that had wiped Silas's tears, combed his hair, and solved thousands of differential equations with him on whiteboards. He believes his genius is entirely his mother's genetic miracle, and that my presence was nothing more than an anchor dragging down his potential, I said. Let him test that hypothesis in the real world. That evening, my phone erupted. Valerie called 14 times in 30 minutes. When I didn't answer, she sent a flurry of voice notes, her voice oscillating between shrill fury and condescending disbelief. Elias, what is the meaning of this lawsuit? An emergency asset freeze? Are you insane? How am I supposed to pay Silas's private tutor this week? How am I supposed to pay for our flight to the National Junior Olympiad in Boston? Another notification chimed. It was an audio message from Silas. Dad, you're so annoying. Uncle Tristan said you're just jealous because Mom is taking me on television and you're just a jobless loser. If you don't unfreeze the cards, I'm never letting you come to my medal ceremonies again. I listened to the voice of the boy I had raised from infancy. There was no hesitation in his tone, no confusion, only the pure, unfiltered arrogance that Valerie had spent years cultivating in him. I deleted the audio file, blocked the numbers, and forwarded the transcripts directly to Marcus Vance. File the discovery motions. I texted my lawyer. Do not settle. 1 month later, I officially stepped into the executive suite at Reed Global's headquarters in Chicago. Harrison Reed didn't treat me like a man who had spent 7 years out of the corporate arena. He knew who I was before I walked away. During my tenure as senior vice president, I had restructured our European logistics pipeline and secured our primary patents in algorithmic high-frequency distribution. The board was skeptical when I told them I was bringing you in as chief operating officer, Harrison told me, handing me a crystal tumbler of sparkling water as we stood on the balcony overlooking Lake Michigan. They thought a 7-year career gap meant your edge had dulled. And what did you tell them? Harrison chuckled, his gray eyes glinting with amusement. I told them that, while other executives were playing golf and attending charity galas, Elias Sterling was at home solving advanced multivariate calculus for fun. I told them that the moment you stepped back into the ring, you'd run circles around every MBA in this building. I won't let you down, Harrison. I know you won't. Now take a look at this. He slid a leather-bound briefing document across the mahogany table. It was the prospectus for a multi-billion-dollar acquisition of an autonomous data infrastructure firm. The deal had stalled due to discrepancies in their predictive modeling and risk assessment architecture. I pulled a pen from my breast pocket, sat down, and began to read. Within 40 minutes, I identified 4 fatal structural flaws in their algorithmic cash flow projections and drafted an alternative framework that slashed their projected overhead by 22%. Harrison leaned over my shoulder, watched my pen move across the margins, and shook his head in quiet awe. God, he muttered. Valerie Croft had a Ferrari sitting in her garage and she treated it like a broken lawnmower. While I immersed myself in 16-hour workdays, rebuilding my professional empire, Valerie and Tristan were aggressively expanding their media footprint. Thanks to Marcus's asset freeze, Valerie no longer had access to my private funds to maintain her lavish lifestyle, her luxury apartment, and Tristan's PR retainer. She pushed Silas into the public eye with reckless abandon. Silas became a regular fixture on morning talk shows and YouTube podcasts. He was marketed as the 7-year-old Einstein, a prodigy who could compute complex derivatives in his head. In every interview, Valerie sat beside him in designer dresses bought on high-interest credit cards, recounting her fabricated narrative of single-handedly cultivating his brilliance through her superior maternal genetics. His father. Valerie laughed dismissively during an appearance on a national daytime show, waving her manicured hand. Oh, he was just a domestic dependent. He couldn't understand Silas's world. Silas used to cry because his father couldn't even help him with middle school algebra. In the end, genius requires an environment of equal intellect. That's why Silas thrives with me. Silas, sitting on the couch in an oversized tailored blazer, nodded smugly for the cameras. My dad only knew how to make breakfast and clean the floor. Uncle Tristan is helping me write my first research paper on quantum probability. The studio audience applauded. Tristan stood in the wings, flashing a predatory grin at corporate sponsors. I watched the clip on my tablet during a flight to San Francisco. Across from me, my executive assistant, Clara, looked uncomfortable. Mr. Sterling, do you want our legal team to issue a public correction? We have your Harvard transcripts, your published papers in the Journal of Applied Mathematics, and your corporate credentials. One press release would destroy her narrative. No, I replied calmly, closing the tablet. Let her climb as high as she wants. Sir, a tower built on sand doesn't need a wrecking ball, Clara, I said, looking out at the clouds beneath the wing. Gravity will do the work for us. The cracks in Valerie's empire began to show in late autumn. Without my carefully structured nutritional regimens and strict sleep schedules, Silas's physical and mental health deteriorated rapidly. In the video clips Tristan posted online to promote Silas's upcoming commercial sponsorships, the boy looked visibly different. His skin was pale and covered in acne from a steady diet of takeout burgers, fried chicken, and energy drinks. The sharp, vibrant spark in his eyes had been replaced by dark circles and an irritable, restless twitch. Worse, his cognitive edge was blunting. True mathematical genius at an early age is not a static party trick. It is an organic, highly fragile neural scaffolding that requires constant, disciplined maintenance. When I was home, I never forced Silas to memorize formulas. I taught him how to visualize mathematical proofs through geometric topology, logic puzzles, and structural symmetry. I limited his screen time, forced him to play outside to develop his spatial awareness, and spent hours debriefing his conceptual bottlenecks. Valerie and Tristan didn't understand any of that. To them, math was simply a performance. They forced Silas to memorize advanced solutions for specific competition question banks so he could perform on command for live audiences. When Silas was presented with familiar, pre-packaged problems, he could regurgitate the steps with impressive speed. But the moment a problem required fundamental first principles reasoning or abstract conceptual leaps, the illusion shattered. In November, Valerie entered Silas into the National Junior Mathematics Olympiad, held in Boston. Tristan had hyped the event for weeks, securing a live-stream sponsorship with a major educational tech platform. Over 500,000 viewers tuned in to watch the child prodigy conquer the under-12 division. I was in my Chicago office, reviewing quarterly earnings reports, when Marcus Vance called my private line. Elias, Marcus said, his voice laced with grim amusement. Turn on the Boston Olympiad stream. Your son is having a meltdown. I pulled up the live broadcast on my secondary monitor. The camera was zoomed in on the stage. Silas was sitting at a wooden desk, his small hands gripping a mechanical pencil so tightly his knuckles were white. On the digital whiteboard behind him, the third problem of the final round was displayed, a non-standard optimization proof involving multivariable constraints. It was a problem I had designed a variation of 2 years ago, when Silas was 5, using colored wooden blocks on our living room carpet to explain constraint boundaries. Silas stared at the board. His lower lip was trembling. Sweat dripped from his forehead onto his test paper. He didn't know how to start. The memorized formulas Tristan had drilled into him didn't apply to this problem. He tried to apply a standard Lagrangian multiplier, scribbled frantically for 2 minutes, realized the logic was circular, and violently crossed it out. The timer in the corner of the screen ticked down. 2 minutes remaining. In the front row of the auditorium, Valerie stood up, shouting from the audience, Silas, use the theorem we practiced in the hotel. The one from Chapter 4. Ma'am, please remain seated and silent, the head proctor warned sternly. On stage, Silas cracked. He threw his pencil against the digital display, kicked his chair backward with a deafening screech, and screamed at the proctors. This question is stupid. It's wrong. The test is broken. You people don't know anything. The proctor stepped forward, attempting to calm him. Young man, you need to return to your seat. Get away from me, you idiot. Silas shrieked, swatting the proctor's hand away and knocking a tray of stationery off the judge's table. My mom said I'm smarter than all of you. You're just trying to make me look bad because you're jealous of my IQ. The livestream chat exploded into chaotic mockery. Is this the genius? He's throwing a literal toddler tantrum on national TV. He didn't even set up the boundary equations correctly. That's basic high school logic. Look at the mother in the front row. What a complete disaster. Wait, where's the father? Didn't they say the father was a deadbeat? Looks like the mother is the one who ruined this kid. The proctor disqualified Silas on the spot for unsportsmanlike conduct and property damage. Valerie rushed the stage, screaming at the judges, threatening lawsuits, and accusing the Olympiad Committee of rigging the competition to favor private academy students. Tristan, realizing the live broadcast was turning into a PR catastrophe, quietly packed his equipment, slipped out the side exit of the auditorium, and vanished into the Boston streets. I watched the screen go black as the organizers cut the feed. I leaned back in my leather chair, took a slow sip of black coffee and felt nothing. Not joy, not vindication, not sorrow. Only the cold, clean finality of a chapter that had long since closed. The collapse was swift and total. Within 72 hours of the Boston debacle, Silas's corporate sponsors terminated their endorsement contracts, citing morals and conduct clauses. The edtech company that had signed a six-figure promotional deal with Tristan Gray Media sued Valerie for breach of contract and demand of refund. When Valerie tried to access the corporate accounts to refund the sponsors, she discovered that Tristan had liquidated the company's operating balance, nearly $280,000, and boarded a one-way flight to Dubai. Valerie was left with nothing, no savings, no sponsor revenue, $50,000 in personal credit card debt, and a disgraced 7-year-old child whose name had become a punchline across academic and social media circles. Meanwhile, my life in Chicago was reaching heights I had never imagined during my years in domestic isolation. In December, Forbes published a feature profile on Reed Global's historic resurgence. The cover story focused on our multi-billion-dollar restructuring, featuring a full-page photograph of me standing in our glass-walled boardroom beside Harrison Reed. The article detailed my academic credentials, summa cum laude at Harvard, doctoral research in predictive algorithms, and highlighted my return to corporate leadership after a 7-year hiatus. The contrast between the useless, uneducated deadbeat father of Valerie's fiction and the reality of a world-class corporate titan was laid bare before the entire country. The public reaction was immediate and unforgiving. Social media sleuths dug up the old daytime television clips where Valerie and Silas had mocked my intelligence. The footage was juxtaposed against my Forbes profile and my patents, turning Valerie into a national symbol of narcissistic delusion and toxic parenting. On a freezing Thursday afternoon in January, Clara walked into my office, looking unusually tense. "Mr. Sterling," she said quietly, "there is a woman and a child in the ground floor lobby. She has been demanding to see you for 2 hours." Security was about to remove her, but she started screaming that she is your wife and that the child is your son. I paused, setting down my pen. "Who is with her?" "Just the child. She looks disheveled, sir. Several junior staff members are filming the commotion." I checked my watch. "Have security bring them up to conference room D on the 3rd floor. Do not let them enter the executive wing. And call building security to ensure 2 guards are stationed inside the room." "Understood, Mr. Sterling." When I stepped into conference room D 10 minutes later, the scene before me was almost unrecognizable. Valerie was sitting at the long glass conference table. The designer coat she wore was stained at the hem, her hair was unwashed, and the desperate arrogance that had once defined her posture was entirely gone. Beside her, Silas was slouched in an ergonomic leather chair. He had gained significant weight. His face was puffy, his clothes were wrinkled, and he was clutching a cracked iPad with dull, vacant eyes. When the heavy wooden door clicked shut behind me, Valerie leaped to her feet as if struck by lightning. "Elias," she gasped, rushing toward me with outstretched hands. The 2 security guards flanking the doorway stepped forward instantly, their broad frames blocking her path. Valerie stopped, her chest heaving, tears streaming down her face, ruining what little makeup she had left. "Elias, thank God," she wept, her voice trembling with manufactured fragility. "You have no idea what we've been through. That monster Tristan, he stole everything. He lied to me, he manipulated Silas, he ruined us. We don't have money for rent this month. The landlord is threatening to evict us on Monday." I stood in my bespoke 3-piece charcoal suit, my hands resting comfortably in my pockets, looking at her with the emotional detachment of a surgeon examining an X-ray. "You have an attorney, Valerie," I said evenly. "Any communication regarding financial matters must go through Marcus Vance." "Elias, please," Valerie cried, dropping to her knees right there on the commercial carpet, trying to crawl past the security guards. "I was wrong. I admit it. I was blinded by fame. I was stupid. I let that man poison my mind. But we're a family. We were together for 8 years. Look at your son. Look at Silas." She turned and pulled Silas toward her, pushing the boy forward. "Silas, tell your dad. Tell him how much you missed him." Silas looked up at me. For the first time in his life, there was no smug smirk on his face, no haughty condescension. But there was no genuine remorse either, only the frightened, selfish panic of a child who realized that the comfortable pedestal he had stood on had been shattered. "Dad." Silas mumbled, his voice cracked and uncertain. I'm sorry, I said. Those things on TV. Uncle Tristan told me to say it. He said it would make us famous. He stepped closer, reaching out to grab the sleeve of my suit jacket, just as he used to do when he wanted me to buy him an expensive toy. Dad, I want to come home, Silas whimpered, tears welling in his eyes. Mom doesn't know how to cook. The food is always cold and gross. She doesn't help me with my math proofs, and she yells at me when I don't get first place. I want you to make breakfast for me again. I want you to blow dry my hair. I looked down at the small hand clutching my wool sleeve. I remembered the 7 years of sleepless nights. I remembered pacing the hallway with him in my arms when he had a high fever, singing him to sleep while Valerie slept soundly in the master bedroom. I remembered the endless hours spent breaking down advanced mathematical concepts into stories so he wouldn't feel overwhelmed. And I remembered the look of pure, unadulterated disgust on his face when he looked at the television cameras and said, if his genes hadn't lowered my IQ, I would have graduated from college by now. I reached down, took his small fingers in mine, and gently, firmly peeled them off my sleeve. Silas froze. His eyes widened in absolute shock. In his entire 7 years of life, I had never once pushed his hand away. I had never once refused his touch. Silas, I said, my voice quiet, calm, and completely devoid of warmth. You are not a baby anymore. You are 7 years old. When you stood in front of those cameras, you were old enough to know what cruelty meant. You were old enough to choose your mother's flattery over your father's sacrifice. Dad. Silas began to sob, genuine fear finally breaking through his shell. I'm sorry. I'll be good. I'll study calculus every day. I promise I'll get into college before I'm 10. I don't care about calculus, Silas, I replied softly. I never cared about your genius. I only cared about your character. And when you decided that human dignity was something to be mocked for the applause of strangers, you threw away the only thing that made you truly remarkable. I stepped back, out of his reach. Valerie stared at me from the floor, her face pale as ash. Elias, are you really this heartless? He is your flesh and blood. Are you going to abandon your own son? I didn't abandon him, Valerie, I said, looking down at her. You took him. You told the world that his brilliance was entirely yours, that my contribution was worthless, and that you didn't need me. I simply accepted your terms. I turned to the head of security. Escort them off the premises. If they return, have them arrested for criminal trespass. Elias. No. Elias. Valerie shrieked, clawing at the carpet as the guards hoisted her up. Silas threw himself against the glass door, wailing at the top of his lungs. Dad. Don't leave me. Dad. I didn't turn back. I walked down the quiet carpeted corridor, stepped into the private executive elevator, and pressed the button for the top floor. The final divorce decree was signed in the Cook County Circuit Court 2 months later, because Marcus Vance presented undeniable forensic proof of Valerie's systematic embezzlement of our joint marital funds and her fraudulent transfers to Tristan Gray. The judge ruled overwhelmingly in my favor. The court ordered the immediate sale of the New York apartment. Valerie was required to reimburse my estate $180,000 in dissipated premarital assets. Since she had no liquid capital, the court placed a judicial lien on her personal income and her share of the property sale. I was granted a complete severance of joint liabilities. As for child support, the judge calculated the statutory obligation based solely on my baseline taxable income, but with strict judicial oversight. All child support disbursements were placed into a court-monitored escrow account that paid directly to Silas's school tuition and basic medical insurance, ensuring Valerie could not touch a single cent for her personal maintenance. When we stepped out of the courthouse onto the windy Chicago pavement, Valerie looked like a broken shell of a woman. Her mother, Mrs. Croft, was standing beside her, clutching a worn handbag, glaring at me with impotent, trembling rage. Elias Sterling, Mrs. Croft hissed, her voice trembling with venom. You think you're so high and mighty. You destroyed my daughter's life. God will punish you for this. I stopped on the granite steps, turned around, and looked at the elderly woman, who had spent 8 years encouraging her daughter to exploit my devotion. Mrs. Croft, I said, my voice crisp in the winter air. 8 years ago, when your daughter drugged my drink at that corporate dinner to trap me into marriage, you told her that even if I found out, I would be forced to give her half my life. Mrs. Croft's face drained of every drop of color. Her jaw went slack. I knew from the very beginning, I said softly, stepping closer until she had to tilt her head up to meet my gaze. I stayed because I believed a child deserved a complete home, and I believed that loyalty was a virtue. But you and your daughter mistook my patience for blindness, and my kindness for stupidity. I looked past her to Valerie, who stood shivering in the cold, clutching Silas's hand. You wanted my life, I said. Now let's see how well you survive on your own. I turned, walked down the steps to where my driver was waiting with the door of the black sedan open, and stepped inside. The car accelerated smoothly, merging into the stream of traffic, leaving the three of them standing alone on the frozen concrete. 3 years later, the spring sun warmed the terrace of my lakeside home on the northern shore of Chicago. In the garden below, my parents were tending to rows of blooming hydrangeas and fresh herbs, their laughter carrying up on the gentle breeze. My mother was chiding my father for overwatering the tomatoes, while he cheerfully defended his horticultural instincts. Inside, the living room was filled with natural light, modern art, and the quiet, steady rhythm of a life reclaimed. Mr. Sterling, Clara's voice came through my wireless earpiece as I reviewed the quarterly research patents for Reed Global's Renewable Logistics Network. The annual academic tracking report from the New York Board of Education just arrived via courier. Do you still want the summary? I paused, setting down my pen. Go ahead, Clara. Silas Sterling enrolled in a standard public middle school in Queens last semester, Clara reported in her professional, neutral cadence. His advanced math acceleration was formally revoked after he failed the state geometry placement exam. His teachers note that he exhibits severe attention deficits, behavioral resistance to structured instruction, and frequent conflicts with peers. And Valerie? She was demoted to an entry-level administrative clerk at an insurance brokerage 6 months ago. Her wages remain garnished under the restitution order. She attempted to launch another parenting blog last winter, but the comment sections were inundated with archives of the 2024 Olympiad footage, and the account was deactivated within 48 hours. Thank you, Clara, I said calmly. Archive the file. You don't need to track them anymore. Understood, sir. I clicked off the earpiece, walked out onto the wooden balcony and leaned against the railing, breathing in the clean, fresh air coming off the lake. People often ask what happens to child prodigies when the curtain falls. The truth is simple. Genius without discipline is nothing more than a fleeting parlor trick. The world is filled with gifted children whose brilliance burns out before they reach adulthood, consumed by the vanity, greed, and superficial expectations of the adults around them. Silas had possessed a spark, but that spark had been smothered by arrogance, laziness, and the poison of unearned entitlement. Without the foundation of humility, endurance, and love, his genius had crumbled into dust. Down in the garden, my mother looked up, spotted me on the terrace, and waved her gardening shears with a bright, beaming smile. Elias, come down here and help your father. He's about to drown the basil plants again. My dad protested loudly from behind the hedge, making us all laugh. I smiled, feeling a profound, unshakable peace settle deep into my chest. I had given away 7 years of my life to a toxic illusion, but I had clawed my way back to the light. I had reclaimed my name, my intellect, my freedom, and my future. I walked down the wooden stairs, stepped out onto the green grass under the wide open sky, and joined my family in the sun.